There wasn't much to do for a bit. I wanted to talk to him, but it was all just one great big thorny mess in my head, and he was fussing with the pods as they grew. One of them popped early on, and he'd gone into a rage for 5 minutes before adding more blood and starting over. Rampage, Psycho-Shy, and P21 were taking care of our momentary defenses. I was doing all I could to not pick at where my suit had fused with me. My legs, I could barely free with a belt sander and scrap metal, but my skin, the itchy sensation was driving me right up the wall. Sanguine had cut a hole in the hazmat suit and scraped enough of Scotch's congealed blood off my leather barding to set an olive pod growing, and a milky white pod next to it. That better have just been a coincidence. Well, there were a lot of white ones. Calm down, Blackjack. At least for now. Finally, he seemed too calm enough that I could ask a question. So, how did you hook up with Golden Blood in the first place? I mean, I know that Silver Stripe faced all kinds of flack for being half zebra, but you were full pony.
I made a mistake, he admitted after a moment. I was just out of medical school and was drafted. I got sent east to Hoovington, near the Zanzebra Strait. The zebras had a number of forward positions and were digging in, so the army was called in to blast them out again. This was 5 years after the start. Cannons were a big new addition, and firearms were issued for the first time ever. New wounds and injuries required whole new medical procedures on the battlefield.
So what happened?
It was a mess. 24-hour surgical sessions. Amputations were common. Unicorn medics like myself were constantly burning out our horns trying to heal. There were so many. Surgery on gunshot or heavy shrapnel wounds was untied and suspect. An officer came in with a bloodied flank. Superficial injury. He could have waited, but he insisted. I should have made him wait, but he was an officer and promised me a rotation back to Manhattan. So I helped him. When I was done, I was burned out. Couldn't even lift a scalpel.
He sighed and shook his head, staring off into space.
A dozen ponies died while I was dicking around with a stupid flesh wound. He honored his word and put in a commendation for me, but it didn't matter. My superiors had faulted me for violating triage procedures. When I was put on the line, my record came with me. I had skills, but the word in the profession was that I was an opportunist, willing to let a dozen ponies die just to get what I wanted. I finally got a position, but I faced that attitude. So, finally I embraced it. Anything to get ahead, to get what I deserved.
So when Golden Blood came along with an offer, you jumped at it, I replied.
Yes. He played me perfectly with an alternate route to advancement. I should have known better, but it seemed too good to pass up. The precise mix of an opportunity to prove myself and all but guarantee personal advancement and prestige. I should have realized what a thorough manipulator he was.
The ghoul said bitterly, and I was reminding myself that he was just as guilty as others.
All I had to do was keep my mouth shut and take care of Fluttershy's pregnancy.
But something went wrong. He nodded and sighed.
Some mares are ill-suited for pregnancy. Fluttershy's was, well, difficult. The pressures of being the Ministry of Peace's leader and mascot were coupled with some real sense of responsibility for injured ponies, not to mention the secrecy of the pregnancy itself. I recommended she take a leave of absence, but apparently that was unacceptable.
He paced back and forth slowly.
There were a number of small alarms, and I was tasked with coming up with contingencies. Stasis was one such contingency, and we were investigating technological methods of saving premature fools. Rarity and Golden Blood squashed rumors left and right, kept the truth concealed from the public and most of her friends. Finally, one night she was brought in a hysterical state. Something had happened, and she was in premature labor. There was nothing we could do to halt it.
I pressed my hooves to my mouth as I listened. That it happened at all was horrible, but it happening to Fluttershy of all ponies was almost too terrible to contemplate. What happened?
At first, we thought the foal was stillborn. No heartbeat, no breathing. Fluttershy was inconsolable. She was taken out, and I rechecked for a heartbeat. To my amazement and shock, it was there. I put the foal in stasis. It was such a fragile life, barely there at all. I couldn't risk telling Fluttershy only to have that infant die. It would have devastated her. No matter my differences with Golden Blood, I couldn't do that to her. I kept it secret from every pony. Reported the foal as being born to another mother who died in an accident.
And you never told Golden Blood?
He snorted. Why would I? Golden Blood was no friend of mine. He should have died at Littlehorn.
I stared at him for a moment. Didn't he know? Sanguine? Golden Blood was her father.
What?
He stared at me, then blinked once, in a perfect imitation of Boo.
They told me her father had been a patient injured in an attack. Are you telling me?
And then he started to laugh. The boiled, wet noise sounded like he was choking to death.
That would have been good to know 2 centuries ago. I'd never have had to gone to Twilight Sparkle with the potential for alicorns if I'd known that.
So, you just kept her in stasis for years? I asked, and he nodded.
Yes. I built the first stasis prod prototype in my garage, actually, just as Chimera was set up for Fluttershy, so that no pony would ever have to go through what she did. I don't know what happened between them. He was always so cool around her that it never occurred to me that they were in a relationship. We perfected the stasis pods, so we thought. I should have been rich from the invention, but, well. Then came fusion spells to improve on ponies. Blanks were introduced last as a source of organs and testing material. I was able to fuse the infant with a healthy Pegasus blank of her own body, and that stabilized her well enough to survive.
Then Sanguine groaned.
Suddenly, I had a treasure that I dared not use. Fluttershy's child. Yet it had been years since her miscarriage. Fluttershy was up to her wings in duties and responsibilities. I couldn't add to that. Plus, as much as it shames me to admit it, I liked having her child as an ace in my pocket. Golden Blood was on his way out. Horse became director. Why take her out of stasis? I could just hold on to her until the opportunity presented itself. Wait until the opportune moment. Perhaps when an opening at the Helping Hoof Clinic presented itself. Or even, perhaps if Fluttershy wanted to retire and had to name a successor.
He licked his lips, making my mane creep. Right. Wanting to use a fool to blackmail for a position. Nothing off about that.
So, I put her in stasis. The only life she'd known.
And then the bombs fell and she was just left there. Just like at the Fluttershy Medical Center.
Yes. I have to admit, with my own problems and preoccupations after the apocalypse, I forgot about her. I tried to use this place and my limited access to ensure my own survival. Once that was established, it was a constant struggle to keep my sanity intact. Saving my family, Project Chimera. They were anchors. I experimented with the stasis pods from time to time out of boredom, but my meddling usually resulted in the death of the occupant. Then, quite by accident, I successfully opened one, and the occupant survived.
Let me guess. Psychoshy.
Yes, he replied. But I discovered something about the stasis. While it does preserve the body, it does not necessarily preserve the mind. She'd been a fool when she was put in. She didn't have any life experiences. That endless stability was simply the world as she knew it. Her emergence into the real world on the other hoof was terribly traumatic.
He closed his eyes.
but a filly or colt, trapped in a place for centuries. I saw play painted across the walls.
So, when you realized that, it lit a fire under your ass to get your family restored.
He nodded slowly. Perhaps not exactly like that, but yes. You have the crux of it.
Suddenly, there was a sharp detonation that I felt through the floor. One of P-21's balefire eggs going off. I really hoped that wouldn't set off other things before we were ready. Once we had our stuff, we were going to be out of the tunnel to the river. Then I'd wish him the best of luck. He'd need it, given how many ponies wanted him dead. The ghoul seemed to read my nervousness.
Relax. The only way this place blows is if Discord breaks free. And even then, you aren't dumb enough to do that.
Oh, he really didn't know me that well, did he? So, Discord. How'd he get tied into Chimera? What's his story? I asked softly.
He is some sort of manifested spirit of chaos, but his magic, his ability to do wild and unpredictable magic at will, was the cornerstones of Chimera. By extracting his magical potential and stabilizing it, we were able to create persistent magical effects that would have otherwise required an army of unicorns to perform. Few ponies realized or appreciated how Flux advanced the war effort.
I nodded. But isn't he dangerous?
Incredibly,
Sanguine replied, but then he frowned.
Or at least he was. Seeing him like that.
Then he shook his head.
No, it must be some kind of trick. He's the sort to try and deceive others for his own benefit.
I gave him a flat look. He was one to talk. Unfortunately, he couldn't take his eyes off the swelling fruit of the copy machine. But can he die? I asked tentatively. He could hurt, that was for sure.
I'm not sure. Not in a conventional sense, certainly. Shoot him full of holes, turn him to stone, or cut off his head, and he'd simply pop out from behind you. Just killed by an accident to have a good laugh at your frustration. The only substance we've encountered that could stop him was a special meteoric iron found beneath the city. Indeed, its very nature seems almost hostile to Discord. Golden Blood used it to trap him, and Horus discovered it to resonate it, increasing the flux yield by 10 times.
But why? I don't understand. He looked at me flatly, and I said, I shoot things, remember?
Clearly, Stapletech was terribly negligent with your education, he muttered, then sighed. Arcane Science 101, then. Magic resonates at a wide variety of frequencies. Everything in the universe has its own set of wavelengths. In nature, most of these waves harmlessly clash with each other. Like static, if you will, but intelligent beings and certain magical organisms can focus this magic into special effects. Unicorn craft, dragonfire, Pegasus flight, earth pony mud-loving, diamond dog digging, and so on. Races have similar frequency patterns, and every individual has their own unique spectrum. Your soul, some might say. These unique frequencies become more or less fixed as you age, and, in ponies, manifest as a cutie mark.
He paused, his lips twitching as if wondering if I knew what a cutie mark was. Signifying our special talents. That much I know, I said with a huff. So, everything in the universe vibrates, then?